proletariat, for the proletariat, for the proletariat, for the proletariat.
Ooh, wee, buddy old pal, I have incurred the wrath of the whites. Something has happened. It's not unique, but very revealing. Something revealing has happened. There's a cat who wants to troll me with racism on TikTok, and he thinks that African participation in the transatlantic slave trade is a gotcha. He thinks that it's going to somehow shut me up forever about racism, or somehow it is a defeater. It's nothing more than a thought canceling cliche. I made this video. I want to watch it. I want to watch it with you.
Black people allowed black people into slavery.
Do y'all not talk to each other? You don't want to get any more nuanced? It's fine. I will play. Let's pretend for a second that this is not a gross misrepresentation of what actually happened. What does this do? What does this do? It doesn't absolve white people of their participation in the transatlantic slave trade. It doesn't stop this country's foundation from being chattel slavery. It doesn't erase the well-documented centuries of atrocities done to black people, both in the US and in Africa. It doesn't make black people the actual villains, because nobody told white people to torture and experiment on and dehumanize black people for centuries. This propaganda is so useless. So I make the video. I say, you've brought up Africans selling Africans to Portuguese people. Immediately in my mind, I'm thinking, this doesn't do anything because it doesn't make what white people did non-existent. It doesn't erase everything that white people did, the entire institution that they built, the entire country that they built on that institution. Doesn't erase any of that. But I was wrong about something. I say this propaganda is useless. It's not useless. Let's look at some of these comments. They actually answer my question. I asked, tell me, what does this do? The point is that it was normal and everyone, including your ancestors, were involved. It was the normal order of things for thousands of years until people in this country started to realize it was wrong. First of all, if you think that America is the first country to understand that slavery is wrong or inhumane, you're painfully mistaken. Then white people freed the slaves. So now they get to take credit for undoing the thing that they did. Meanwhile, African nations stopped selling slaves, not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't profitable any longer. He just made that up. That's just made up. Wait until he finds out there were black slave owners in the US, and one of them actually owned the most slaves out of every slave owner in the South. He's talking about Anthony Johnson. So here's the claim, right? The first legal slave owner in American history was a black tobacco farmer named Anthony Johnson. Now, this says this is possibly true. The wording of the statement is important. Anthony Johnson was not the first slave owner in American history. And this is easily disprovable. Easily disprovable, because how did the slaves get to America in the first place? But he was, according to historians, among the first to have his lifetime ownership of a servant legally sanctioned by a court. Anthony Johnson was a so-called free Negro who owned a 250-acre farm during the 1650s, with 5 indentured servants under contract to him. 5 indentured servants. He made up the thing about him owning the most slaves. There's no evidence that he owned the most slaves. That's the silliest shit on the face of the planet. Don't look at me. I was too poor. What it does is explain historical truth. Let's play. This guy thinks he's cool enough to get me to care about him. I agree with what you said, but what it does is it doesn't put all the blame on white people. There it is. I agree with what you said, but what it does is it doesn't put all the blame on white people. That's the purpose. That's why they did it. That's why they love this talking point. It's because white people simply do not want to be blamed for slavery. I'm going to say it again. White people simply do not want to be blamed for slavery. That's it. In the video, I say things to the tune of, I'm not going to deny that there were some tribes involved in the transatlantic slave trade. But it doesn't matter because it doesn't stop what happened from happening. It doesn't stop the actions of white people. It doesn't stop them from codifying whiteness into law. It doesn't stop them from creating slave codes, the black codes and the pig laws, segregation subsequently after that, and purposefully creating a second class, a permanent underclass out of black people using scapegoatism and pseudoscience. It doesn't stop them from experimenting on black people, right? But let's talk about African slavery. Let's talk about things African slaves never had to go through. Okay, y'all, trigger warning. 1, 2, 3. There's a case, Humphreys versus Utz. In this case, a slave overseer nailed a slave's penis to a bed and beat him until the slave ripped his penis away, ripped it off. The slave died. African slaves didn't have to endure that. Literal torture. Literal torture. Henrietta King, when she was about 8 or 9 years old, was accused of stealing some candy and was punished by being smushed underneath a rocking chair. Listen to her talking about her own face. You see this face? See this mouth all twist over here so's I can't shed it? See that eye? All rayed, ain't it? Been that way for 80 some years now. Guess it gonna stay that way till I die. Well, old Mrs. made this face this way. Want to know about slave days, do you? Well, sit on that chair. I'll tell you what slave days was like. Castle was a well-meaning man, but old Mrs. was a common dog. Was 20 some of us slaves, and that was one house where the men working in the field get more to eat than the house servants. In the old house, Mrs. was so stingy, mean, that she didn't put enough on the table to feed a swallow. Well, here's how it happened. She put a piece of candy on her washing one day. I was about 8 or 9 years old, and it was my task to empty this slop every morning. I see that candy laying there, and I was hungry. Ain't had a father working in the field like some of the other children to bring me eats. Had just little pieces of scrap back each morning, throwed at me from the kitchen. I see the peppermint stick laying there, and I ain't dared go near it because I knew old Mrs. was just waiting for me to take it. Then one morning I was so hungry that I couldn't resist, and I went straight there and I grabbed that stick of candy and stuffed it in my mouth and chew it down so quick so old Mrs. never find me with it. Next morning, old Mrs. say, Henrietta, you take that piece of candy out of my room? No, ma'am. Ain't see no candy. Child, you lying to me. You took that candy. Deed, old Mrs., I tell the truth. Ain't see no candy. You lying and I'm gonna whoop you. Come here. Please, Mrs., don't whoop me. I ain't see no candy. I ain't took it. Well, she got her rawhide down from the nail by the fireplace and she grabbed me by the arm and she turned me across her knee whilst she sat in her rocker so she could hold me. I twisted and turned and she finally called her daughter. The gal come and took that strap like her mother told her and commenced to laying it real hard whilst Mrs. hold me. I twisted way so there wasn't no chance of her getting in no solid lick. Then old Mrs. lift me up by my legs and stuck my head under the bottom of the rocker. and she rocked forward so as to hold my head and whoop me some more. I guess they must have whooped me near an hour with that rocker leg pressing down on my head. Next thing I knew, the old doctor was there, and I was laying on my pallet in the hall, and he was pushing and digging at my face, but he couldn't do nothing at all with it. Seemed like that rocker pressing on my young bones had crushed them all in the soft pulp. The next day, I couldn't open my mouth, and I feel it, and they won't no bone left inside at all. My mouth kept a slipping over to the right side. I couldn't chaw nothing, only drink milk. Well, old missus must have got kind of sorry because she gets the doctor to come regular and pry my mouth open, pry my mouth. He get it art while so it's sitting open and I can move my lips, but it kept moving over to the right and he couldn't stop that. Just where it is now. And I ain't never growed no more teeth on that side. Ain't never been able to chaw nothing good since. Don't even remember what it is to chaw. Been eating liquid stews and soup ever since that day. And that was 86 years ago. African slaves became a part of societies. Africans would enslave prisoners of war, people who were in debt, and criminals. African slaves were allowed to read. They were allowed to start families. They had terms on their slavery. There was no mutilation. When nobody mutilating African slaves. Persistently troublesome slaves were often identified by whip marks, while reclaimed runaways were often identifiable by brandings, by cropped ears, or by the absence of front teeth. The editor of American Slavery as It Is, 1839, presented a compilation of many runaway advertisements in which the slaves concerned were marked by branding, cropping, and the removal of teeth. In a note on these advertisements, the editor apparently explained that such mutilations furnished a convenient mark by which to describe a slave in case of that slave's elopement. White society would presumably have been familiar with the significance of such marks, so that these markings would have helped to secure slave ownership by reducing the chance of successful escape and concealment in the Southern community. An example of the marking of runaways appears in the William Long papers. Long reported that a slave who had run away from his plantation had been caught. He added, "I gave him a real whipping and hand sawing, and he has been a fine Negro ever since. I told him he might run off if he chose, and I would knock out one of his jaw teeth and brand him. And I intend to stick to my promise." In Africa, slaves were not separated from their mothers. Slaves who were mothers, their children were not born into slavery. In America, immediately following Bacon's rebellion, slavery became inheritable, and slaves themselves became inheritable. You were born into slavery. You were not born a freeman. Slaves were quartered, eviscerated. So no, white people, I'm not going to let you pretend. Let me ask you a question. Let's say I'm selling cantaloupes. I'm going to sell you that cantaloupe. Let's say it's a bad practice to sell cantaloupes. Maybe cantaloupes are killing off another species of melon in the area. That's pretty bad. That's pretty fucked up that I'm doing that. But then you take that cantaloupe home and you fuck it. Yeah, I sold you a cantaloupe, but you fucked the cantaloupe. Didn't nobody tell your freaky ass to fuck that cantaloupe? Nobody told your freaky ass to fuck that cantaloupe. Oh, freaky ass. There were complex political relationships between African slavers and Europeans. European slavers would not have been able to acquire 12.5 some odd million slaves without the help of African slavers. This is a hard truth. But nobody told them to fuck the cantaloupe. If you don't take nothing else from what I'm saying right now. White people, take this. Nobody told white people to dehumanize African people. Nobody told them to treat them like cattle. That was entirely on white people. By the way, you didn't stop doing slavery. It's in the 13th Amendment. Nobody told you to cut the babies from the wombs of mothers and then stomp on the babies. That was part of who white people were. That's part of what you want to go back to. This whole thing about shifting the blame, because that's all you're doing is shifting the blame, trying not to take blame, but you must take responsibility for your participation in it. And your participation in it was vile. That's it. You don't want white people to be blamed for slavery, but they participated in slavery. They built nations upon slavery, and they did so while torturing and mutilating and raping human beings. So wherever they got the people from is the least of my concern. When you took the cantaloupe home, you defiled the cantaloupe. When you took the humans to your nation that you were building, you defiled the humans. That's it. To bring up African slavers as a distraction. Now, these same motherfuckers will come on to my live streams and say shit like, stop being a victim and take some accountability. Ain't no accountability here. Ain't no accountability here. Let's find the accountability in my comments. The U.S. had slavery, yes, but in 250 years, we progressed out of that slavery and became one people in a free country. Bullshit. A bullshit. Hold on. I got you. Don't even worry about it.
A bullshit?
There are countries that still have slavery after thousands of years. America still has slavery. Shifting the blame. Where's the accountability at? I don't feel a need to absolve of it. First of all, write better. I don't feel a need to absolve of anything to do with slavery. I've never enslaved anyone. This ain't about you. You think I'm blaming you as an individual for slavery, you dingleberry? I'm like, oh, this guy wildebeest on fucking TikTok. He's to blame for. No, the only reason we talk about any of this is because we are drawing a through line. We are finding out how the past influences the present. It's the only reason why we talk about any of this. I responded to the shit just to say, hey, listen, that doesn't absolve white people of their villainy in the transatlantic slave trade. I will say it again. It does not absolve white people of their villainy in the transatlantic slave trade. And now, because you are a white person and you identify white people as your in-group, you are trying to take up for your in-group. And that's not how you grow as a human. Fuck excusing what your ancestors did. Fuck shifting the blame over to other people. All that anyone is asking is for there to be a collective consciousness about the reality of the country, the realities of race as they are now. That's it. That's the only reason why we do any of this shit, because when you don't have a collective consciousness and a collective understanding about what race means in the country, bad things happen to black people. I asked you to tell me what the purpose of this bullshit is. And like normal, most motherfuckers misunderstood the assignment. The world was built on the backs of the oppressed. No one cared what color you were. Bullshit. Otherwise, they wouldn't have invented race. Blows my mind that people on here defend the horrors of U.S. slavery. Doesn't blow my mind. Well documented by whites because we actually had a written language. This nigga thinks that Africans didn't have written language. This nigga thinks that Africans didn't have a written language. Think about the stupidity of this. Okay. You outlaw reading for slaves. You make it illegal for a slave to write and read, right? You make it illegal for slaves to read and write. And then we talk about the brutality that happened to those very same slaves for whom it was illegal to read and write. And then you say they didn't have a written language. Of course, they had a written language, you fucking dingleberry. I am fucking flabbergasted. I am amazed at how fucking stupid this shit is. Look at this. Look at this. The original racist whose comment I responded to is now taking credit for the semi-virality of my post, as though I've never had a video with more than 6. Like, this is the peak of white supremacy. There is this hodgepodge of victimhood, saviorism, revisionism. It's like this goulash of just like white people being all the things. And then the white man coming to take credit, saying, I made this happen for you. First of all, the you're welcome. Him thinking that this type of behavior is somehow good. No, this is bad. Also, him thinking that I couldn't get the views on my own is fucking weird. This is just what I mean. Like, if this does not make you depressed, I don't know what will. White people are successfully indoctrinated. They wanted to be indoctrinated in the first place because it is my personal belief that the realities of inequity are too much for white people to bear. Okay, here's the baseline. Here's doing nothing at all. Here is doing some good shit. Here's doing nothing at all. Here is doing bad shit. So they on the scale of things, you're not even accidentally doing good. You're directly doing harm. This is just really fascinating. American chattel slavery was uniquely inhumane. It was a complete undermining of the autonomy that every human is owed. Whiteness was developed specifically to make chattel slavery work, to justify what was being done. People invented whiteness just to say that it was okay to do the terrible things that white people were doing. Listen, it's okay because they are subhuman. These black people are subhuman and we are the most human. Hold that L. Hold Johann Friedman Blumenbach, 1752. He's a founder of racial classifications. The foundation of modern physical anthropology in the United States was strongly influenced by the European tradition of anatomy and physiology. Those most influential among these thinkers were German naturalist and anatomist Johann Friedman Blumenbach, an American-born physician. Blumenbach has been called the father of physical anthropology and also the founder of racial classifications. He coined some of the racial jargon and typology still much in use today, such as the word Caucasian, which was derived from the mountain range between the modern states of Russia and Georgia. Gomez Enes de Zurara comes up with the original racial classifications, specifically to describe, to justify taking slaves off the west coast of Africa. And here he describes black people as being of the lower hemisphere. What is this? What does he mean by the lower hemisphere? Two hemispheres at the time of the brain. There is the cerebellum and the cerebrum, right? Like the upper brain, the lower brain, the upper hemisphere, the lower hemisphere, the lizard brain, saying that they were prone to the base of survival, no different than any other animal, that they were operating purely out of desire or like well, I want it, so I'm going to go get it. But what heart could be so hard as not to be pierced with piteous feeling to see that company? For some kept their heads low and their faces bathed in tears, looking one upon another. Others stood groaning very dolorously. First of all, the fuck you mean dolorously? Who you calling Dolores? Feeling or expressing great sorrow or distress. Okay, looking up to the height of heaven, fixing their eyes upon it, crying loudly as if asking help of the Father of nature. He's saying he feels sorry for these slaves that he is helping take into captivity. When he does this, he starts talking about it as a justification. He's saying he's going to bring them to Portugal and then bring them to Christ. because that way he's saving their souls. I can't do anything about white people burying their heads in the sand. I can do something about my reaction to it. I will not watch you take grains of truth to spin lies in order to soothe yourself so that you don't have to give your people culpability for their actions that no one else provoked them to do. I will not be silent while you do that. I won't do it. That's the end of my tirade. All power to all the people except for Ralph. Do something good for your neighbor. I love y'all.
For the proletariat. For the proletariat. For the proletariat. For the proletariat.